And I did the same thing. Like I put a lot of pressure on myself. Like, what's that one thing that God has created me to do? And how am I going to find that one thing? And if I don't find that one thing, then I've like screwed up God's plan. Well, I'm not big enough, strong enough, or smart enough to screw up God's plan.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Rooted, where we are rooted in truth, growing in freedom, and prospering in life. We are your hosts, Josie and Simone. We have a special guest, Stan Thompson, here with us today. Just a background for our listeners, Stan leads Bethel University's Office of Career Development and Calling, and today we're excited to specifically touch on staying rooted as one is navigating, discovering their purpose, passions, and calling in life. Stan, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, Stan, do you just want to tell us a little bit about your current position here at Bethel and what that involves and what you do here?
Sure, yeah. My position is in the Office of Career Development Calling, and I'm the director. My title's a dramatic title, the Director of Vocation, Pathways, and Partnerships. But really, I lead the career development pieces of our student development at Bethel University. And so I have a staff of individuals who help with doing coaching appointments, doing presentations in classrooms, doing all of the things that really help support students to find their next step. And for some students, that might be help picking a major or trying to decide what their career path might be. And for some, it might be helping them with a resume or writing a cover letter, things like that. So we're here to really help students take that next step toward their first great job after Bethel.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think there are so many great opportunities at the Career Development and Calling office up there. I know I've been there several times and gotten a lot of help from so many different individuals and leaders. What made you want to help students in the first place? Where did that desire come from?
Sure. Well, I've always loved helping people, even from like as I was even as a kid or in junior high and high school. I've really just loved helping and being of use. And developing college students wasn't really anything that I'd had in mind for quite a while in my life, but I'd always loved helping people kind of take their next step. And so when I was in high school, I remember helping classmates study for tests, and when I was in college, I developed into I'm a musician, and so I would help with leading music teams and helping classmates with their homework and stuff like that. And then even after in my professional career, I always enjoyed helping people that I worked with really try to figure out what their next steps were, whether it was learning a particular skill in the department that they were working in, or trying to figure out what the best next step in their career was and things that they could do to get there. So that's just something I've always really enjoyed. So when this role opened up at Bethel, it seemed like a really great opportunity, and I've loved it so far.
That's incredible. Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that. So you mentioned that your position, your official title is the Director of Vocation. What does vocation mean to you? What does that all entail? Yeah,
that's a really loaded word, vocation and calling. There's a lot to unpack there. But for me, it really is the purpose that God has for me as an individual, or for you as an individual. And it's a dynamic thing. It might not necessarily be one thing, and it might not necessarily stay the same throughout your whole life. But something for me that I found is that I'm really a strategic dot connector. I like to take different concepts and figure out how they go together to connect different people, figuring out okay, what's this person's similarities and skills? How can they interact with one another to really use those skills well together? So those are some things that I've really found to be like a through line throughout my life that I've really gravitated toward. And even though I've worked a lot of different jobs in a lot of different industries, but that's been a through line that I've been able to point to and say, really, that's been my vocation. And as far as callings and vocations go too, there are also things that God puts in front of you in your life that you might not have had on your radar, or that are just more situational. So I mean, part of my callings, my vocation is to my family, as a husband, as a father. There are some things as volunteer service in the church, some more job specific things. It really can change and shift throughout different phases of your life, which I think is really exciting too.
That's incredible. Yeah, I love how you talk about just kind of that all-encompassing aspect of vocation, because I feel like a lot of times as college students, we always think, oh, what's my career? What am I focusing on in my career? But how you incorporated, your family and your church and your community is all part of your vocation. It's all part of what God has called you to. So I love that. Could you you're talking a lot about having lots of different career directions as a kid. Could you kind of tell us about how you navigated that college journey? Because I know you mentioned you had like 5 majors or something earlier when I was talking to you.
Yeah, it's almost embarrassing. Yeah, but yeah, very much. So I always had a lot of interests as a kid, and a lot of different things, and arts was one of those things. Like I love to draw, and I love to color, and I love to sing and make up songs and do music. And I don't know if I was any more creative than any other kid, because if you leave any kid in a room for a while, they're gonna find creative things to do. And I think we unfortunately lose some of that as we get older. I really respect that about kids and their freedom. But like I had a lot of interests, and I was the kind of guy that I had a lot of interest in high school too. And when I was looking at colleges, like I took a college catalog and opened it up and just started circling the classes that I thought I'd be interested in. And when I was done, I was like, I'm going to have like 7 different majors, and it was just crazy. It was like this does not work. And so I think for me, I really went into college. I think I was more driven by things that I thought I should do rather than things that I really felt a specific call or pull to do. Yeah. And so like I went into college as a pre-seminary major. So it's probably the equivalent at Bethel of like a BTS major. So I went into college like that, and I was like, man, I just don't feel like I'm called to be a pastor. And so I pivoted. I became a business major because I'm like, I have some interest in business, and that's a good practical major. I can do something good with that. And I took accounting, and accounting's great. You can have a really great career as an accountant if you're cut out for it. I am not cut out for it. And so I pivoted, and then I was like really getting into really finding my passion in music at that time. And so I decided to go to a different college and study music as my major, like contemporary music. And so I was a guitar performance music business, because I had to keep the practical piece of that in there, major, and did that for a year, and it was great. And I was on the other side of the country, and so I was like, I got to get back to my family. So I went back to the college I was at before, went into like music education, because it's music, but it's still practical. Like you can find jobs as a teacher. And then finally I was like, I just got to do music. That's really what I'm passionate about and want to do. So yeah, I cycled through like 4 or 5 different majors, two schools. Like it was, it was kind of ridiculous, but yeah, so yeah, that was kind of my journey.
I was just thinking, now that you've gone through that and you've had that experience, for others, would you say, hey, follow your passion, do what you love right from the start? Or would you say, no, you still need that practical reality aspect to life and to your major? Or how do you find the balance between that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, like for me, I should have taken the opportunity to do like more intentional self-reflection. I mean, because I was kind of an all-in person. Like I'm going to dive into this and really get into it. But I really probably should have taken a step back and said, okay, are there any assessments I can really use to start to kind of narrow down my path rather than just jumping in and trying a major? I mean, there are ways that you can experiment and try different things that you can find joy in through volunteering, student groups, clubs, other activities, sports. But I should have been more intentional about really figuring out what the best thing was for me, or how I should pursue it, because it's really gonna be different for everybody. I mean, because somebody might find a lot of passion in their entrepreneurship class, or in their accounting class, or in their history class, or an art class. And so I'd say trying different things to really help people focus in on what they're most interested in, rather than just like hopping majors all the time like I was doing. That's just a pain for everybody.
Yeah, was that stressful for you at all? Because I know as a business major, there's a lot of pressure of, junior year, you need to make sure you have an internship, because then that'll lead to a job. And trying to get all of the right boxes checked. And for you, when you're jumping from major to major, did that create a lot of stress, or how did you kind of stay rooted and navigate through all that?
Yeah, it did create stress, but I also was more kind of fly by the seat of my pants kind of thing. And like, well, this is where I'm going now. I'll figure it out as I go there. And so it was still, as I was making the changes, I think once I started homing in on music for me at the time, it started to feel a lot more natural and a lot less stressful. The stress then is then figuring out what you're going to do with that professionally after college. Yeah. But I didn't worry so much about that. But the jumping around, I think it did create some stress and some questions that I was like, okay, I really should start figuring this stuff out.
Yeah. And I feel like the topic of having to choose yourself, having that choice that's in your hands, I feel like that's a struggle for a lot of people nowadays. Yeah. And I know it's a struggle for me as well. Just like being super indecisive. What do I do? What if I don't make the right choice? And I think we often put that pressure on us, and then we're so afraid that we don't make any choice.
Right.
So then we make the choice to not make a choice, which ultimately leads to nothing. So what type of advice would you give to those to just make that first step, to just make that choice and see where that leads you?
I did the same thing. Like I put a lot of pressure on myself. Like, what's that one thing that God has created me to do, and how am I gonna find that one thing? And if I don't find that one thing, then I've like screwed up God's plan. Well, I'm not big enough, strong enough, or smart enough to screw up God's plan. I mean, that's the first thing. Like we do not really have the capability. I mean, we can avoid it. We can actively rebel, but we really don't have the capacity to stop God from doing anything he wants to do. So I think that takes some pressure off right there. But I think individually, everything we do in our educational experiences, we're really learning from. And I think if you have a couple of options on the table that can honor God, you can honor God either way through. Like pick one, and it's going to turn out great. God's going to do his thing. I mean, it might not end up being the best thing, your favorite thing, or the best outcome, but you're not going to dishonor God or screw up his plan by picking a path that you feel like you've been reasonably equipped to do, or if you feel like you're reasonably meeting a need that's out there for the world or for your community or your family. That's God honoring. And so I'd say if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, or you're really stressed about finding that one thing, take a breath because it's going to be okay. But practical steps, I think, are really to try a lot of different things, and to know that it's okay to pivot to something different if you try something and you get, like, let's say you graduate in a particular major, you get down the road a few years and you're like, I'm really not feeling this profession that I'm in. And you've looked at other options within a profession and you're like, I'm just not feeling it. Well, you can pivot because your time in college, your time in learning in life, I mean, it really develops the skills that employers are looking for anyway. And the skills that employers are looking for are, in a lot of cases, not specifically technical. I mean, they're looking for people who can communicate, who can problem solve.
That's so true.
Who can manage technology reasonably, but you don't need to be if you're not going into computer programming, you don't need to be a computer programmer. You don't have to have like those specific technical skills. But those skills that you are developing are skills, and they are things that are highly valued. And so you're going to have job options, even if you do graduate with that like marketing degree, but you decide to take on something else, or you do something different, or you graduate with a history degree and you're not going to go into something that's specifically history. We had an event on campus for our hippos, our history, philosophy, poli-sci majors, and that's a concern, right? Because it's like, what do I do with the philosophy degree? Well, and I think the tough thing is everything. You can do everything with a philosophy degree. And we had alumni there who had hippos related degrees, and one is in software sales. One opened up his own business. One's doing public policy for a major bank. One's a lawyer for a human rights organization. I mean, there's all kinds of things because they learn how to think. They learn how to think. They learn how to reason. They learn how to respectfully argue positions. You can learn how to do anything. So, and those kinds of skills are really embedded in liberal arts education, even if you are like going into something more technical, like accounting or like a science STEM related field. You've still got that core like English, literature, history, those types of classes that really help you develop those communications and critical thinking skills.
That's so true. I love how you talked about you do have the opportunity to pivot. Someone told me one time, you can't move a stationary ship. And I love that idea of how sometimes you just have to start moving in the right direction. And as you're moving, you'll start to realize the right course. And you might have to make a little adjustment, but you can't get anywhere if you're not moving.
Totally right.
So I love that idea. I'd love to hear more about, you talked about your passion behind music. And I know earlier when I was talking to you, you talked about how you started a band. Could you kind of just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I've been in a few. I had a high school garage band, which was fun. I think we did like 3 gigs in 4 years or something crazy like that. But yeah, I've loved doing music. I've loved music even since I was a kid, but really, and I tried a few different instruments here and there, but I really fell in love with playing guitar when I was in, I think 7th grade, something like that. Right before 7th grade. But then that was something that I just became passionate about and really, really enjoyed. That was my particular vehicle for expressing my voice, I guess, as a musician. So that's something that I've carried through, and I've studied it formally, but I also just play for fun too. But yeah, I was in a band in high school, and then in college started a band with some friends. And after college, we ended up playing like youth gatherings and coffee shops and churches and stuff like that and colleges. And so I traveled around with them for probably, 2-3 years, 4 years after college, and was able to just make a little bit of a living at it. Not a ton, would still pick up part-time jobs when I was in town. Yeah. And that's how I ended up kind of getting into the working world is my transition out of college was I was like, I'm not going to find something full-time because I've got a summer's worth of gigs really lined up already. So I'm just going to go work as an artist for the summer. And then that just kind of kept on. And then as I needed some, money and I was off for a couple months, I'd go pick up a job with a temp service doing office work or something. And so I ended up finding my way into a banking career as the temp work picked up and the band stuff kind of ramped down. And so yeah, it's been a weird path, but a lot of fun.
Did you ever at one point in your band career journey, did you ever see yourself, hey, I would love to go big with this and make this full time? Like, would that be a dream?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was always a big dreamer. So like you asked me what I wanted to be, it was always something huge. Like I want to be an astronaut. For sure.
That's us.
I want to be a rock star. It was never like I want to be the guy that turns the wrench that hooks up the boosters to the rocket. Like I want to be the astronaut,
exactly.
Man. I want to be the one going there.
Yep.
And so so a lot of my aspirations have been unreasonably large. Or maybe it's good to have them be large, but then you kind of learn as you get into it, like, okay, that's good, but maybe I don't, maybe you get into it. Like in music, I got into it and I spent quite a bit of time on the road, and it's romanticized, right? If you're not out there doing it. And I got into it and I'm like, well, this is a lot of fun, but it also takes me away from my family a few months a year. Right. And it's also something that, takes me away from my friends, and it's hard on relationships. And so it's one of those things that I was like, okay, I aspire to do that. And then that season kind of passed and I was like, okay, I was interested in marrying who's now my wife. And I was like, I don't really want to pursue that. I don't want to be away from her that much. Still was able to do some stuff in local bands and playing at church, worship leading and playing guitar and singing as they need and stuff has always been a lot of fun, and I still do that. So I love that.
That's awesome. So you're still able to kind of have more of a normal career, but pursue that passion of music on the side, it seems like. Yeah,
and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot less stressful for me that way too, because making a living in the arts it's really difficult. There's I can imagine. You got to hustle. I mean, you got to really hustle to do that. And I'm at a point now where I was like, well, I have a couple of kids, don't want to be doing that grind. Don't want to be out in bars and clubs until 3 a.m. and then have to get up to take kids to school at 7. And so there's a practicality about it too that I was like, I think it's time to kind of move on.
Yeah, I remember going into college out of high school, I would talk to Josie and be like, hey, that'd be so cool if we started a band, because Josie and I and our family are so into music too.
Love it.
And nothing ever came of it. It was simply just an idea in my head. But we can definitely... It would have been so fun. Yeah, we can imagine how amazing it would have been.
You could still do it. Why not?
True.
You guys do everything
we can just
else.
Start a band
Why not
with
just
you.
start a band? Yeah, absolutely. Let's just start a band.
We started a podcast. Next up is the band.
Why
guys.
not?
Be ready for it.
You can totally do that. You do that now or as a second career. You have tons of time.
So true.
That's so true, though, because when you think about it, the average person has like 50 years of working life. And realistically, I'm probably not going to do the same thing for the next 50 years of my life. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of encouraging. Like, there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of options out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one thing that I would love to ask you about is, as people are discovering their calling, I know our world focuses a lot about finding your purpose. Mm-hmm. And how would you describe finding your purpose? Because sometimes I feel like there's a lot of pressure to do that.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to some of the things we were talking about a little earlier about finding your purpose, trying different things at different classes, having conversations with different professionals in different fields about what it's really like to do the work, seeing what types of things you enjoy, what gets you excited and motivated, and it might not be a traditional career path kind of thing. But as far as finding your purpose, I think taking it to God in prayer, using the tools that are available to you. If you're really not sure on a direction, take something like a strong interest inventory to just see if there are things that pop out or things that kind of show up that you're like, oh, okay, that might be something that I'd be interested in doing. Taking a strengths, like a Clifton Strengths inventory, getting an assessment, like just looking at that kind of stuff and seeing, okay, how does this ring true in my life? And then how do these particular traits lend themselves to the things that I'm passionate about? And I think those things will over time lead you to purpose. I mean, looking back, like I mentioned, I really like to connect dots, and I'm a strategic person. And I see that throughout my past as I look at that, but I didn't really have the words to put to that till I was like well into my 40s. So it can take some time, but I think the more tools that you use that are available to help you kind of put words and thoughts to what you kind of naturally intuitively know and feel can really help you lean into that. I think once I had strategy or strategic pop up on my strengths, I was like, oh yeah, that's really it for me. And I've been able to lean into that and to just understand that that's a value that I can bring to conversations that not everybody has. And so whatever that strength or that concept or that value or that gift is, if you can articulate it, you can probably better understand and figure out how you can bring those strengths into a particular context to really benefit the others around you, which also will then benefit your career track because people will see, okay, they're really making a contribution here and they're really intentional about it. I want that person on my team. So that's something that I think can really be helpful in finding your purpose.
Yeah, I love how you didn't link career and purpose directly together. Mm-hmm. I love how you keep purpose separate as a holistic thing of qualities of yourself, who God made you to be. Because I think a lot of times we do get narrow-minded with our career is our purpose and what we do is what our purpose is.
Right.
So I think it is really important to just focus on what were we actually made to do as a whole human and who did God make us to be.
Right.
And then we can use that career to fulfill that and to proclaim the gospel through our career. But it's not fully about our career.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know Sadie Robertson talks a little bit about this in a devotional I was reading, and she was talking about how ultimately our purpose is to love God and love others. And a lot of times when we think about our purpose, it's something that we have to achieve down the road as we figure out our career and everything. But she articulated that purpose of loving God and loving others is something you can do today.
Yeah.
It's not something that you have to fulfill 10 years down the road. It's what you can do exactly today.
Right. I agree with that. And I think that experience will influence how you use your purpose. But I think you're right in that we each have like gifts and skills and passions and interests. And so how are we using where we are right now with those in the context that we're in to do those things, to serve our neighbors for God's glory? Like that looked a little bit different for me, 20 years ago. And then as I've developed more skills and gained more experience and insight over the last 20 years, I may approach the same situation a little bit differently now and probably more effectively. But I was still able to live into my purpose at that point too. Yeah, so it's dynamic, and that's I think that's one of the exciting things about it too. Is it's one of the comforting things is that okay, it's dynamic. I can use it now, and then I'll use that into the future, and it'll change, and hopefully improve.
Exactly.
But it'll get better, and you'll get, as you're more intentional and you learn more about it, you can be even more effective at it. Yeah, that's something that really excites me about it.
100%. I'd love to know just a little bit more. Where do you see your future? Like where's Stan in 10 years?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. I think it's interesting that you ask that now because I have 2 sons. They're in high school. One is a freshman in high school and the other graduates in a month. And so as he's grown and got his driver's license a couple of years ago, and now he has his own car, and as he's kind of getting ready to launch out from high school anyway, we've already started feeling kind of the change that brings to the family dynamic. And that's given my wife and I some more freedom. Mm-hmm. But I haven't really thought much about like how that'll all play out and that'll feel like over the next, couple of years. So I've only been thinking about that for a couple of weeks, but that's something that's certainly kind of pivoting underneath our family right now. That's kind of changing some things. But as far as how I'm contributing to things in 10 years, I don't really know. I like where I am. I like being able to be effective in my role at Bethel and help support students in taking their next steps. I really like where we're going as a university. I think there's a lot of really good stuff happening here. I love the Christian community. I think that's so important and something that I really value being part of for as long as I can be part of. And we'll just kind of have to see what the needs is. I always like to be like valuable and kind of moving forward and changing things. And so I think as long as I have those opportunities, I guess wherever I have those opportunities is where I'll be. So, but I don't really have I don't have it mapped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it mapped out.
Yeah, looking forward in your life, there's definitely a lot of unknowns. How do you trust God with that plan that he has for you? Colossians 1:17 says he's before all things and in him holds all things together. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? How can you trust God with your whole entire future?
Yeah, I think staying close to him, staying close to Jesus, keeping your eyes focused, staying in the Word, staying in community with other believers. And that's I think a little bit easier now in this context of being at Bethel for students and I think even staff and faculty. And it'll get more challenging as you leave this place.
For sure.
To really maintain that, because wherever you are, even if you find other Christians to rally around and be with, there'll be a lot of pressures in the world that'll try to drag your attention away from Jesus, whether intentionally or not. So I think for me, the trust really relies. I put my trust in Jesus, and I stay in that through being in the Word and through really reflecting on how God has been faithful throughout my whole life, even in super hard times, God's still been faithful and has brought me through. And
Amen.
And that's that feels different for everybody, and people have different reactions to that depending on their circumstances and how they interpret that. But I think that really does ring true, and so that's how I just kind of keep my trust in him going forward.
Yes, that is so good. I love that so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Stan.
Yeah.
So one question that we always like to ask people at the end of the podcast is, what is one piece of truth that you encourage all people to be rooted in?
Yeah. I think really going back to what I just said is really just be intentional about maintaining that connection and deepening your relationship with Jesus. That is the thing that, even though things will be hard, I'm not saying that it'll make your life great and everything will be happy, but really having that firm foundation is super important. And so I'd say no matter what, keep that foundation strong, invest in that foundation, and everything else will fall into its appropriate place, even if it's a hard thing. Just having that peace in knowing Jesus and in trusting in him, that just makes the hard times a little bit less difficult.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, and I think that everyone can learn from that. So thank you so much, Stan. We really appreciate you coming on this podcast and just sharing all your wisdom with us.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks for having me. And I'm learning from you too. This is great.